let's talk about Aptera. Some obstacles that we see on the horizon. Are they being secrecy? What did Elon Musk recently say that bears on the Aptera production? And let's talk about pricing. Let's just go in that order, first of all. Are they being secret? I asked that because I got an email from somebody out east who we email back and forth quite a bit about Aptera. Very knowledgeable person, real close follower of Aptera for a while now. And some concerns expressed were they seem to be a little bit secret, a little quiet lately about what's going on. And one of the things he highlighted was the mention that the amalgamation will be done in Switzerland first. And then the curious thing is, well, wait a minute, isn't this car supposed to be available in the US? You know, didn't we all pre-order to get this car in the US? That's supposed to be built in California. So why is it being legalized first in Switzerland? So that was an interesting point. And then some other things too about not having a mention yet of a big donor, still no big, and I want to say donor, a big investor has popped up, like a $50 million investor to get Aptera to production. There hasn't been any talk of who that might be. So those are good points. Nothing, this is not a debate or anything to argue about. I just think they're good points that we can talk about in the comments. My personal view on why it seems like maybe less information has been coming out lately. First of all, maybe it just seems that way because Aptera has been so open that now they're busy working on some stuff in Europe. And maybe it's just the information is not flowing as quickly as you and I would like because we're so hungry for information. Another thought is maybe they're not exactly sure what the exact next move is. And maybe there's nothing to report because we're simply waiting for the investments to equal an amount that gets Aptera to production. So personally, I don't think there's any kind of secrecy, so to speak. And if you look at like the car I'm sitting in, the Nissan Leaf, when this thing was designed and built, you and I weren't able to watch every ounce of that process. Every supplier wasn't named as it showed up. We weren't given factory tours. So other automakers have been nowhere near as transparent as Aptera. So they're not they're not an organization that keeps quiet when there's something good to report. I think maybe there's just nothing really to report. But in the comments, let me know what you think about that. I thought it was a fair enough point. And what do you think about it being legalized first in Europe? I really want to know your views of that. Do you think that means that it'll be a Europe first car, which, hey, I would not like that, but I get why it might be a good idea. It's a very EV friendly part of the world over there. So I would understand it. But what do you think? Is that the way this is going? Let's talk about pricing before we get to the Elon Musk part. So pricing, it looks, well, we don't know. Okay, but we're guessing that the launch edition is going to land, we're hoping anyway, under 40,000. So under 40,000. I think if you just go to the launch edition on the Aptera.us page, you'll see it's, well over 30,000. And then some of that pricing was based on a couple of years ago. So it would stand to reason that it's going to be somewhere between maybe 32 and 39,000. We don't know. This is guesstimation, not speculation, guessculation. But in the comments, of course, we want to know what you think. We did do a survey about this, a little video, and a lot of people commented that they do not want to see that price higher than like 34 or 35,000, or they're just going to walk away. It's understandable. I understand that. And here's why pricing matters with Aptera and why I think it shouldn't matter as much as it does. The Tesla Model 3 finally is becoming like available, but it's getting to the point now, it looks like, where you're going to be able to just buy a Tesla Model 3, probably for under 40 grand, depending on, the model, everything that you want. And you get that $7,500 tax credit. Certainly that helps. So now you're looking at a situation where the Aptera Launch Edition will probably cost as much or more than a base Model 3. And that scared a lot of people in the comments. We've seen a lot of comments about that. Like, how could you ever choose to buy the Aptera when you can get a Model 3 for the same price? Now, before, I didn't understand that. I've never been able to become a big fan of it because it's always been so far of reach, I guess. So for that reason, I've never dove all the way in big time into Tesla. because I always figured I could never afford them. Now that's starting to change. But where my mind really started to change on Tesla is when Rick Rutledge and Faith from Ohio showed me their Tesla Model 3. It was a color I thought I would have never wanted, white. It had white leather interior. If you just told me that, I would say yuck. But when I saw it in person, it was absolutely a gorgeous car. And went through the trunk space, went through the front space, went through the interior detailed, checked out the infotainment, looked at the self-driving or full self-driving, that's debatable, but watched it, sat in it while it drove itself to a destination that Rick put into the system. And I'm sold. Tesla Model 3 is a fantastic and now almost kind of affordable automobile. So a lot of folks are like, well, why would you? Well, here's why. Take a Tesla Model 3 and set it right next to an Aptera. It's not like choosing the difference between a Toyota and a Honda. These are not comparable vehicles. They're completely different. I mean, if you want just a really good car, somewhere in the 30K area, Model 3 is perfect. If you want something revolutionary, something that is a two-seater, three-wheeled vehicle that charges by the sun, that's perfect for camping, perfect for bringing your pets along with you, the Aptera is just a totally different vehicle. So it's not like, okay, I'm either going to buy a Tesla or an Aptera. You know, in a perfect world, you probably have both, you know, but that's not the world I live in. The world I live in will have probably a Nissan Leaf and then an Aptera eventually when it comes out. But again, in the comments, let me know, when you look at the price and you see other vehicles in the same price, does it kind of make you pull away from Aptera and just go to a traditional four-door, 4 or 5 passenger vehicle? Be interesting to know how you think about that. Also, again, on this topic is the window of opportunity that Aptera has that might be closing. And I say this because there's been talk of Tesla coming out with a new, smaller, even more affordable car. Model 2, I think, is the floating title around the internet world. And, of course, the Chevy Bolt has been so affordable for this last year. But here's where the window of opportunity opens up. We're not going to see a smaller Tesla until 2025. So probably we'll get a picture of it in 2024, production in 2025, if it really happens, because there's so much that goes into that. You know that. You've seen this. You've watched these things play out. And then, of course, they stopped making the Chevy Bolt. So now you're dealing with either a new car, if you can buy one, because at least one dealer said you might not be able to get them even if you ordered. But if you can get it, you got a car that's no longer made. A lot of us don't like driving cars that are no longer made for supply, repair issues that come up in the future. Or you're stuck with a used one. So I think it kind of moves the Chevy Bolt out of that lane of affordable vehicle. And then the Model 2 doesn't really exist yet. And it still leaves this nice lane for Aptera to be a vehicle that you can afford. Now, when I say you can afford, because we already talked about pricing similar to the Model 3, the Model 3 doesn't charge itself. You have to factor that in, at least I do, when I'm considering what vehicle I'm going to buy. How much money am I going to save? And Aptera made a nice video about that, explaining how much money you can save driving the Aptera. So the timing is right. If Aptera can get something going in 2024, that would be great. We'll see what happens. So that window's going to close, especially as Chinese cars start to make their way into America, like BYD, NIO. They're making fantastic cars, and they may be able to get them here less expensive than the Aptera or the Model 3. Maybe we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Lastly, the thing Elon Musk said. Now, at the shareholders meeting this week, somebody put their hand up and said, hey, what about the hyper efficiency of the Aptera? Do you think that's a model that maybe Tesla could go with? And Elon's answer was interesting. First, he claimed that he didn't know much about Aptera. I don't want to say I don't believe that, because that would be saying he didn't tell the truth. I think he is aware of other EV makers that are playing in his area. So I think he at least knows about Aptera. That's why he said I'm not overly familiar, which is probably true. But what he said was the idea doesn't mean anything. So he didn't say Aptera was a good idea or a bad idea. He said it just doesn't matter, because in his words, making prototypes is easy, Manufacturing is hard. Manufacturing at a profit is brutal, or he said excruciating maybe. And, he knows what he's talking about. He's been through this whole process. But Tesla is a vertically integrated company. So they maximize profit per piece by doing everything themselves, from batteries to everything. Where Aptera's approach is different. So we can assume Aptera's profit per car will be less because they're buying all the components from suppliers and just assembling it. But won't their overhead also be less? Less people and equipment needed to assemble, for one. Also, if there's a $3.1 trillion recall, I think it was, with the Bolt because of the LG batteries. But who paid for that? Well, it wasn't GM, it wasn't Chevy. Most of that, almost all of that, was paid by LG, all the expense of that massive recall. So I hope that would never happen with Aptera, but what if something happened with, let's say, one of the in-wheel motors and they had to recall them? Then wouldn't maybe LFI, the company that makes the in-wheel motors, have to cover at least most of the expense of their bad part? So there's some protections, I think, in the way Aptera is choosing to go about this. Some lower overhead, I believe, in the way they're going about this. And it's a different model completely than Tesla, from what I understand in my limited understanding. So I know Mr. Musk knows what he's talking about when he talks about producing an EV. He's proven it. He knows, he's done it. He's been through very difficult times, still goes through some. They still have recalls. They still have challenges to work out. He understands that, so we could take him at his word when he says it's hard. Now, Aptera's going about it so differently that I think they can get it done. But again, in the comments, what's your thoughts? That's what really matters to me. Let us know in the comments. Thank you, Mug Clubbers. We really appreciate you. The map is filled out nicely. And thank all of you who watch. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you can, if you want to. There's room for 2 more subscribers. Now you can subscribe. Everybody can subscribe. All right, that's it. Chad and Sarah. Sarah, drive the lightning. Thanks.